It's episode 108 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. Thanks for joining me each week and for subscribing to the show. You know, if you go to hankgarner.com, there's links there in the sidebar where you can subscribe. Subscribe at iTunes, subscribe at YouTube, subscribe on your Android device. However you get it, please subscribe and leave a comment that helps other people find the show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week. ThirdScribe.com is there to help authors do everything that an author needs to do to market their book without having to get into the weeds themselves. It leaves authors able to write books, what they need to be doing. Also, thank you to the Association of Independent Publishing Professionals, the AIPP. It is an organization that helps people that support the indie author community band together and help each other find the resources that they need. If you support the indie author community, go to AIPPonline.org and sign up today to showcase what you do. And if you're an author, go to AIPPonline.org and find out who can help you accomplish what you need to do. Now on to our great interview today with Rhett Bruno. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. I'm very happy today to have Rhett Bruno on the show. Welcome to the show, Rhett.
Hey, Hank. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we've been trying to connect for a while, and glad that we finally could. I begin each show with a variation of the same question, and that question is, how did you first know that you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that because I knew to expect the question. But, at a certain point, it's kind of always just been something that I have to do. I almost can't help myself. But it really started when I was younger. I guess it was probably early middle school. I had some mental issues. And just talking to a psychiatrist, they said maybe to just think of stories to help me distract myself. So that was how it started. I would think of stories similar to all the fantasy and science fiction video games I played and just think of stories, and then I would start writing them down. And I mean, in 7th grade or so, I wasn't a very good writer, but I still did it. You know, I'd write these short stories and little books, which seemed cool at the time, and show my parents. And just over time, that's slowly started evolving. And until one day I decided to actually sit down and write a full novel in about high school. And I think the moment I decided, maybe there's something there, is when I showed that first manuscript to my high school English teacher, and she kind of pulled me aside just to tell me that that students give her stuff like that all the time, and most of the time she just has to try to be nice, but that there was actually a lot of promise in it, and I might have potential writing. So I think that was the first official moment where I thought, maybe I'll, kind of keep doing this on the side and hope something comes of it.
That's great. I love the idea that it's something that you've always had to do. I get a similar answer to that from a lot of writers, that the storytelling gene, for lack of a better description, is always there, and it's just waiting for someone to help you switch that gene on. There's been numerous stories on this podcast about how someone intervenes with just a little piece of encouragement, and that's all it takes to get the fire lit.
Yeah.
So when you were in high school and you decided to write that novel, what was that like?
It was mostly fun. I mean, back in high school, I would stay up till 2 or 3 a.m. playing video games anyway. So I would just, after school, stay up late and write, or after sports practices or anything, write a little bit here and there, and just try to grind something out and see how it went. It was really kind of just an exploration, and it isn't a book I would recommend to many people right now, but it was a first step that I think every author needs to take.
Oh, absolutely. We've all got those things in the drawer that we may not want to show to everybody, but it's absolutely a part of our evolution. So that's awesome. What was that first story that you wanted to tell? Well, I mean, you don't have to get in detail, but was it like science fiction? Was it fantasy?
It actually is published, but there's a whole story behind that. It's a like epic fantasy series, sort of for younger crowd, not really young adult or younger crowd. It's called Isinda, and I was 16 and I didn't really know the industry at all, so I sort of got played into doing a vanity publishing kind of thing. And, wound up paying a lot of money to deal with average authors who put average editors, sorry, put no effort behind marketing or anything, and, just having these books out there that they said were amazing, but really never went through people studying them and working on improving the books. And, it was just a very bad situation that I wish, going back, I wouldn't have done the same way.
Well, sure. But obviously, did you get the book back and then republish that like with KDP?
I didn't. It's actually still with them. I mean, they get it because I don't think it's exemplative of my best work anymore at this point.
Gotcha.
So I could probably try to get rights back, but at this point, it's out there. Some people liked it, some people didn't like it, and there's not much I could do about it now. And I think it's just, it's a nice way to tell other authors to be wary of schemes like that, and that there's so many options out there for publishing and getting things critiqued that if you're as young as I was and my parents didn't know anything about publishing either, it was very, very easily to get sucked in by people acting very nice and complimentary.
Absolutely. That's that's a whole can of worms that we could spend an entire show on. But needless to say, you figured out there was a better way. What did you do after publishing Isinda? Did you obviously you probably felt okay, this is something I can do. Even though your publishing experience wasn't great, you obviously had felt the encouragement and the sense of accomplishment that I finished something. Where did you go from after that first project?
So, it's actually sort of interesting. So I started writing like an extension of that series, like a new series of books. It's actually the longest manuscript I've ever written. And because I didn't want to deal with this vanity stuff anymore, it was almost kind of inspiration to actually get published.
Right.
You find the real way out there now that I was getting older. So I started writing this, and at the time I didn't read that much. High school kind of turned me off to reading, which is definitely a problem.
Oh, that happens to so many people. It's crazy.
Yeah. I wrote this whole book, and and I used a critiquing group to have someone look at the manuscript. And the woman that took it, she relentlessly destroyed this manuscript, like to the point where critical feedback I'm okay with, and I love that. But she was almost rude to a point.
Yeah,
and
right.
Like, that was also another moment where I was like, okay, I could be an author because I received this, and I was like, well, now I'm gonna do better. And that point, it sort of inspired me to just get back into reading, because in high school they made me read all these books I didn't want to read, so I kind of lost interest in it. So at that point, I really was like, okay, I'm going to get into my true passion, which is science fiction. I'm going to read some of the Golden Age classics and everything. So I started reading Heinlein and Clarke and all those guys. And I really think that was the point where I discovered, I know how to write. I don't know how to create a story or frame a story well. And I think reading all of those really helped me kind of get in the groove. And that was when I used everything I had learned to start writing the Circuit series, which was the first book that I had traditionally published.
And how long did it take you to write that first Circuit series book?
The first book, it's tough to remember, only because I was in college, and architecture school is like, we don't really sleep.
Right.
It's like days molding into days, and somehow over 2 years in there, the book just got finished. I can't sit back and remember when or where I wrote it, but it happened.
That's awesome because, most people you hear stories of, well, I had this passion for writing, but I also knew that I had to pay bills. So, I went and went to college, found a trade, went to work, had a family, and then, I start finding time to whittle out this thing. And you had these two very demanding things competing against each other, and did it at the same time anyway. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, like it's almost just something that like I have to do, and if I go like a week without writing, I kind of almost get anxious because I feel like I have the story in my head. I need to get it out before I forget a certain thing or anything like that.
Right, right. Also, something I want to ask you before we move on further is the first book that you wrote and then had the Vanity Press publish was an epic fantasy book.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of writers have this dream of publishing an epic fantasy. I don't know what that is, but there's something I don't know. There's this romantic idea, I guess, of publishing epic fantasy.
I think it's
no. Go ahead.
I think it's a lot of like kind of the young adult stuff we read. At least when I was growing up, we read. I mean, there was the Merlin series and all those books that Harry Potter. It was really just these epic fantasy series. So I feel like for people my age, it just seems like the genre to get into almost.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I've been trying to find an answer to this because it's like we, as young children, we begin with fairy tales, and then from fairy tales, it's a natural progression to go to maybe more grown up fantasy, maybe get into Tolkien. It has some of the same allure, but without the childishness. Maybe
Yeah.
it's a transitional thing. I don't know. I still love epic fantasy, but I also love sci-fi, and I see the two as close cousins, but sometimes arguing cousins. It's like a lot of people like fantasy and sci-fi, but we also have the snobs that that say one is better than the other and all that. But I do find it fascinating when authors kind of dip, a foot in each pool.
Yeah, no, that for sure. I mean, I feel like but just based on like all the video games that existed, it was mostly fantasy, and I kind of was inspired by that. And most of the books that are young adult, that were out back then were fantasy. So I started writing that, but I think it wasn't until I was like, you know what, I'm going to write science fiction. I really found what I was more passionate about writing about. Just I like the idea of the prospective futures and relating it back to where we live today, and I think that's a lot easier to put out there with science fiction.
Sure. So which book was the first Circuit book?
It's the Circuit Executor Rising.
Gotcha. Where did the idea for that story come from?
So the idea was kind of silly. I'm a huge Star Wars fan and that kind of stuff. And I always watch it in the back of my head. I'm thinking, how are they walking around on these ships in the middle of space? Because there should be gravity. So the whole idea came from that there would be this element discovered in Earth that allows us to generate artificial gravity fields. But that would become like the gold rush of that future, and just strip mining the Earth's mantle causes the Earth to fall apart, and so humanity is forced to kind of live on the planets surrounding Earth, but they're always drawn back to that planet. So that was the whole idea came from just having an artificial gravity field on a ship.
I love that. I think some people think that that story ideas, come from elaborate places and that tend to be really deep philosophical stuff. But sometimes it's just as easy as how are these people walking around on a Star Wars ship?
Yeah, exactly. Like there were no characters or anything considered back then. It was just kind of an idea for a setting, and then everything came from there.
That's great. When you got that idea, did you start writing notes? Like, how did you track the progression of the story? Did you just keep it all in your head, or I know you were a student at the time?
Yeah, I'm not the best outliner, but for that I did start to do at least brief outlines and like setting outlines and character outlines and all that kind of stuff. It was the first time I really delved into that because it can be sort of complicated of a story. But yeah, I mean, usually I'm not too detailed with my outlines. I mean, when I'm saying outlining, it was probably like 5 pages worth of outline. I keep a lot in my head or just take notes on my phone whenever it comes to me.
Right, right. Um, when the idea for this hatched and you start thinking, okay, this is a story. I'm going to start, putting this on paper or on screen as we do now. Did you have any friends around or any peers that were also interested in writing? Did you have any mutual encouragement or motivation from other people?
No, not really. I mean, I didn't develop any of my writer friends from who I have like from all around the world just via email
Right.
into publishing the circuit. None of my friends from school did it. I mean, my parents would read my work, but parents say everything is good.
Right.
So with the circuit, I really I kept it close to the vest and worked on it very hard, doing research and reading other science fiction books to be inspired and make sure like my structure was working well. And then once it was finished, I started sending it out to agents and publishers to get real feedback from them because I didn't really trust the critiquing groups that much yet. I would do some of that, and I had really no beta reader friends or anything to give it to.
Gotcha. There's a big war that's gone on through the years. Not so much anymore, but you're either a Star Trek or a Star Wars fan. You said you're a big Star Wars fan, and there's lots of arguments about that. Well, Star Wars is just space fantasy, and Star Trek tends to lean more toward true science fiction and closer to hard science fiction at times. There's a lot of hand waving going on, but those are some of the arguments. Did you ever worry when starting to write sci-fi that you had to be technically correct on things? I think that's probably one of the other allures of fantasy is you get to just completely create the world and you don't have to worry about anchoring things so much. Was that ever a concern for you writing science fiction?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I always try to do like at least the base level of research because I'm not a scientist, but so that when I write something that's explaining something technical, it at least sounds plausible.
Yeah.
And I mean, like with the circuit, there's that element. So, at a certain point, we don't have an element that could generate artificial gravity. So that's being made up. It's almost fantasy in a sense.
Right.
But, when it comes to how that powers things or how things are powered, certain shields, metals and stuff, I always try to do a base level of research so it sounds like what's happening in the world is real and it's not just gobbledygook.
Right. And I guess with science fiction, if you place things far enough into the future, it almost becomes fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, like they say in like Thor or whatever, the science becomes magic.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so 2 years go by and you have this book. And are you still a student at this time?
At which one I published it?
The circuit, yeah. When you finished the book, were you still in school?
When I finished the first one, I think I was in my final year, yeah. That
Okay.
was when I started submitting it because I actually did my architectural thesis on like publishers and libraries and stuff. So it sort of wound up helping me find publishers. So that was when I actually did start submitting to small presses and agents and people like that.
What year was this when you were doing the research on publishers?
It was probably 2012 or 13.
Okay, all right. Did self-publishing come on your radar at all, or had you been burned so bad
Yeah,
by the vanity that kind of was out of the question?
I think so. Because of that vanity, I had this desire to get in with and critique by like a real professional publisher.
Sure.
And get like real editing and real feedback and stuff that, I had been burned so bad by that vanity press that I really wanted to look for that.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big proponent of using all the tools that are available. Sometimes self-publishing is the route that fits the book and the writer, and sometimes traditional publishing is. Some of the arguments back and forth get kind of silly when we have multiple tools available. Let's take advantage of anything and everything that comes our way for sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I mean, it also comes down to like I don't have the money to pay for a good editor and a good cover designer, and hope I make any money through publishing. So
Right.
I felt more if I was able to hook on with a good publisher, hopefully they could help me build my fan base enough to where maybe one day I could self-publish and it wouldn't matter because I already have my fans.
Exactly. Exactly. So you start sending out. Did you land an agent first, or did you get the attention
Uh,
of a press? How did that work?
on the circuit, I mean, I had no sales history, and the only sales history I did have was from a failed Vanity Press book,
Right.
which I'm sure didn't help. So couldn't find an agent, even one that would really respond. So I was looking at small presses. I went with a few. The one I chose was okay at first, and then it turned out their editing also wasn't very good, and I was getting a lot of negative reviews about stuff that should be solved by copy editing.
Mm,
Things that like I look out for, but that's why there's editors on books. It really has to be a team effort to catch everything.
right.
So I actually wound up transferring less than a year later that book and the rest of the books in the series over to Diversion Books, who they're a smaller New York City publisher. They didn't really do science fiction, but they really loved the book and were interested in it.
Gotcha.
And I mean, so far with them, the process has been great. I mean, they have great cover designers and one of the best editors I've ever worked with, and that was really what I was looking for.
Gotcha.
So I think the circuit's in a much better place now, and hopefully work in the future could get more attention for it, as it really was my first book and trying to overcome what really had been a failure from that Vanity Press.
Gotcha. I don't think a lot of people understand kind of the difference in small presses and maybe one of the bigger publishers. What was the experience like with you when you signed with that small press? Obviously, it was better than the Vanity Press.
Yeah, I mean, it was great in that like I didn't have to pay for anything. I was working with all my own editors.
Right.
But they were really small, and I guess they work with freelance editors, so it wasn't, I guess, someone that they know that they could trust completely. But they're pretty small, and they put out a lot of books. I mean, it was a fine experience, but I didn't want to have to pay for my own team of editors on top of theirs, because after the first one, I didn't trust their copy editors.
Yeah.
And so I think going to Diversion, where they have an in-house editor, an in-house copy editor, and then proofreaders, was much safer to get the best book out there, because that's really what it's all about. I mean, I already had it written.
Right. Right. Did you have any trouble transferring to another publisher? Did you guys kind of have a mutual understanding, or was that a struggle at all?
I believe that I had to pay a little bit of money to give them back what they invested, and it wasn't because I had already made enough off the circuit. So, and then they gave me my rights back, because technically you're supposed to wait 3 years, but I felt that my editing wasn't up to the par that was in the contract based on all these reviews I've got, and like people sending me little typos like constantly. Readers would be like, I love the book, but I found a typo on this page, and I was like, this isn't working out. I don't want to have to pay extra money for editors when I'm already working on other books and everything.
Yeah, I'm sure that helped to bolster your argument that you had notes from readers and things like that. That's one great thing about the connected way that we buy books now, is readers can leave reviews at places like Amazon, and also can connect directly with you. I'm sure that helped your argument with them.
Yeah, it was Goodreads was really helpful. People would send me messages there, like any reviewers I talked to and stuff. And I mean, we didn't end on bad terms. It just wasn't working out, which is why I'm not going to badmouth or say the name of the publisher.
Sure.
But I just think it was better for me, and especially because the version's right in New York. They were easy to deal with, and so I felt like it was a much better decision at the time.
Yeah. Boy, and some of the folks at Goodreads can be brutal.
Yeah, well, that's Goodreads is good because you get like a more honest.
Oh, absolutely.
Amazon, where like you see these books and it's like 3,000 5 stars with one word, and I'm like, okay, how did they get that? Is it like a robot probably.
Right.
But yeah, Goodreads can be brutal, and sometimes, like I remember someone gave the circuit 1 star because I was using the imperial measurement system instead of the metric system,
Oh my gosh.
and so they stopped reading after like 10 pages and were mad at me for being imperialistic. And I was like, I'm from New York, like it's just the first measurement system that came to mind.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I mean, it's amazing to laugh at now, but
Yeah.
what a frustrating thing for a writer. Like, really, that's what you're going to ping me on? But okay. Oh man. So you got the circuit at a new home, and you're really excited about that, and things are going well. How do you follow up that book?
So that was when I started writing Titanborn,
Okay.
which is the book I guess we're on here to talk about for the most part. And no, I actually had an interest in trying to write short stories because I was reading a lot of like Asimov's and the magazines like that.
Yeah.
Just because I'm a pretty slow reader, so I felt at that time like I could digest a whole bunch of short stories
Yeah.
rather than spending all my time reading like one book, and kind of get more experience and more research into reading other people's stories. So that was I actually wrote Titanborn as a short story, and like at this point I had people that I could show work to, and I showed it to someone. It was my high school teacher. I showed it to her and asked if she would edit it as a short story, and she loved it. And I mean, I loved writing it. I really loved writing in the first person because it was my first time going for that, and I loved the character and the overall story. And after seeing the short story finished, I actually I didn't even want to submit it. I kind of put it away and started expanding and writing a novel based on that short story. So I kind of novelized my own short story without being asked to.
Wow. So some people would look at that as that short story being a really elaborate outline for setting the stage and
Yeah, pretty much. Actually.
Yeah. That's amazing. So, what did you learn by writing short fiction where you had written long pieces before that? What did you learn about having to encapsulate the story in a shorter span? And are there things that jump out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't write that many short stories. I have a few published, and it's mostly the ones that I was really proud of. Because I went through a phase where I was just trying short writing, and I think it really helped me learn just to keep the word count down. It taught me brevity, where sometimes I would go on long info dumps. You write a short story, you can't do that, and
Right.
so you really have to cut it up and just let the story shine through. And I think I went through a phase where I think I wrote 5 short stories in a row, just for fun, and that really helped me learn how to keep the story focused and just allow it to shine through instead of inundating people with too much information.
What did fleshing that out to a full novel do for you and do for the story?
It did a lot, and I think most of the part with the short story was I got to the end, and I was like, well, that happens, but I really want this to happen, but that doesn't make sense with this whole story, and it reworked into the same characters, same setting and overall premise, but really almost a different story. And I took some of the themes from that short story, such as age and family, and really focused this novel on that. And at a certain point, while it is science fiction, it's almost a character study of this main character, and it's very, very character focused on him. I mean, you're inside of his head, and where there's all this epic stuff and epic situations going on in the background, it's really mostly focused on him, his relationship with his past and his partner and all members of his family and things like that.
What's the premise of Titanborn?
So the premise of Titanborn is that Malcolm Graves, who's the main character who narrates the story, is a bounty hunter, which they call collectors, for the large corporations that have sort of taken over our solar system. And his job is basically when off-worlders are causing problems for these corporations, he goes and he takes care of it, which either consists of locking them away or executing them in secret. So he's pretty much just a fixer. And So he's been at it for almost his entire life. He's like nearing 60 now. And he messes up on a job because he fears he's getting slower and that they're going to force him to retire soon. But he has nothing else. He had a daughter who he let out of his life because all he wanted to focus on was his jobs and making money. And so he gets put on this new case involving a terrorist bombing back on Earth to figure out who's behind it and which group of off-worlders are behind it. And he gets paired with this pretty much this young, perfect partner. He's part of a special initiative to make super soldiers. And he's paired with this old... so Malcolm is paired with him to find out who's behind these terrorist attacks and bring them in. And it sort of leads him down this whole path towards coming to terms with, actually working with the partner because he was a lone wolf, but also realizing that he's kind of at the end of the line and he can't do this forever. And a bunch of specters from his past come back into the story. People from his family and people he's worked with before, old girlfriends, and he kind of, has to have his swan song mission to go out on top. But they really wind up right in the heart of a very large terrorist conspiracy led by off-worlders from the world Titan on Saturn. So that's why it's called Titanborn.
Nice. So I'm picking up elements of classic sci-fi, of noir, of kind of conspiracy action. It sounds like you've taken a lot of subgenres and rolled them up into this book. Sounds really exciting.
I always have a trouble like deciding what subgenre it exactly is
because it's all of them.
Yeah, sci-fi noir has been what a lot of people called it. Like David Simpson, the author, called it that. So I'll trust his opinion. And, I guess it's that. I took a lot of inspiration from Blade Runner. Mostly not the story as much as the world and how it's living. The only difference is their world is ruined by, like, industry. Whereas in Titanborn, 300 years before the story, the Earth had been hit by, like, a dinosaur extinction-level meteorite. And so they're rebuilding, and that's what allows these corporations to take control of how Earth runs. But at the same time, a group of colonists had fled to Titan and have been living there for 300 years. So it's sort of a conflict between these two peoples who have been separated for so long that they're almost like aliens to each other, and Malcolm gets thrust right into the middle of it, and it's nothing he would ever expect.
Nice. So if you're looking, if you're having trouble finding a good motivation for your story, just throw a meteor at it.
Yeah, well, that's a good motivation for creating a setting. Like,
sure.
Throw a meteor at it and see what kind of Earth comes after, because that's sure to mess some stuff up.
Yeah. So who published Titanborn?
So Titanborn, I actually was when I finally got an agent. So I was submitting it to agents, and I knew some people and was able to sign with an agent at DGLM. So we went through a lot of submitting. A lot of publishers were wary of it because there's a tragedy element to it. But we wound up signing. So it's Random House Hydra.
Nice.
Which they're a smaller digital-only branch off of Del Rey. But they share the same editors and cover designers and everything, which is great because, like I said, editing is really important to me.
Sure.
And my editors there and have been amazing. And it's Random House, so I get a marketing budget, and they do a whole bunch of marketing things. I just found out I'll actually be at New York Comic Con signing a limited print run of Titanborn.
Nice.
Which is exciting. So, they do a lot of stuff that my other small presses couldn't do because they really are connected to a big press.
Sure. Now, being a digital-only arm of Random House, you said you're doing a limited print run. Are there options for doing a bigger print run?
So there are options for a print run if it were to get popular enough. They would do a print run. They're fairly new, so they have some. I'm actually, I think, the first solely science fiction book coming out with them, with another coming out in like July.
Cool.
So that's why getting into the Comic-Con stuff and print run, like, we'll see.
Nice.
But I think it would all depend on the success and stuff like that.
Sure. Well, that's great though that you get the option there, and that it sounds like some of the the big five or big six publishers are finally taking a clue from what's been happening on KDP and becoming more nimble to try to meet reader expectations. So that's definitely glad to hear that. That's awesome.
Yeah, the digital first. It's really cool. I mean, obviously every writer wants a big print run.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean that's where the money's at. But I mean, I only know how to market digitally. I only read digitally for the most part.
Right.
So it was fine for me. And I know Hydra. If you Google them, they went through some troubles when they first opened with how their contract is. But my agent looked into it and everything. They've really fixed everything now. And as of now, I'm just working with great people that are connected with Random House and have great connections to Kirkus and Publishers Weekly and a lot of places you can't get as an indie.
Sure. Having the circuit as a writing credit and with it doing fairly well with a small press, did that help you to land your agent, do you think?
Yes.
Being able to show some success and
definitely for sure, because I mean I had a very small connection to him, which is the only reason he agreed to look at it, because at that time the length of Titanborn was I'm pretty sure only novella length, technically, so he wasn't that sure he could sell it. But we worked on kind of bringing it up to novel length by adding some really crucial scenes, I think. And he was willing to take a chance because I explained how I really did all my own marketing on this first circuit and was able to get a lot of nice critical reviews, and where it might not have had the best sales ever, critically people really seemed to enjoy it as far as stoppers. So I think he was happy to take the risk on it, and now we've sort of found a groove in this Titanborn series where we could take it and plan for the future of it. So
Nice.
He's been really, really great to work with, especially helping with the developmental side.
Nice. So you see a follow-up to Titanborn?
So I always pictured Titanborn as a series of standalone books that are connected with varying first-person narrators.
Okay.
So it's taking this pretty crappy setting and showing different perspectives of people doing different things throughout it. So I have a sequel that's written already. We're figuring out publishing dates and editing and stuff right now.
Nice.
Then I'm working on another one after that. But yeah, it's a different sort of series. Not like the circuit where if you start with the second circuit, you really won't know what's going on.
Right.
Because it's one continuous epic story. This is really a series of more personal stories about people doing things concurrently in the same universe.
Right. What is your daily writing habit like? Do you have are you one of these people that has to get a certain word count every day, or do you?
Yeah, I've listened to your podcast and heard a lot of authors that do that. I can't really do that. I call it like burst writing, where I could spend like a month only being able to get 5 pages out that I feel good about, and then all of a sudden something will click and I'll write 60 in like 2 days or something.
Yeah.
So I try to write it like lunch at work or every night at home, but sometimes I just know I'm not feeling it, and then other times like a week goes by, I'm like, wow, I wrote that many pages.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of like you. I really, really respect people. The first that comes to mind is like Weston Oakes, who was on one of the early episodes, and I think it's 1,200 words every day. No matter what happens, 1,200 words every day of the year. I think he said he takes Christmas off. And I really respect that. And I know that if you maintain that, you're like 2-3 novels a year, just kind of, show up, just by maintaining that habit. I can't do that.
No, I can't either. It's just, it doesn't work for me. It feels almost too much like a job maybe or something like that.
One thing
I like to feel confident in what I'm writing.
Right.
Not just that.
One thing I do notice, though, is that I'm always writing in my head. Whether it's a day where I'm sitting down and typing or not, the story is always kind of, rumbling around in there. And I think sometimes giving it that space allows the story to develop, and then when you do get to the keyboard, it really flows out, and maybe you don't paint yourself into a corner as much because you've had time to kind of stew on it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's why I'm always thinking about it. That's why I have my phone on me. I have just pages in that stupid notepad app.
Oh, yeah.
with no real organization, so it sucks when I have to go look back through it. But I'll just write down something. And I mean, sometimes it's like a crucial idea. Like I feel like I can remember a few with Titanborn where it's like, wait, that needs to happen. Like I need to find a way to fit that in now.
Yeah, but it's fun to read back through some of those stream of consciousness ideas, and you're like, oh, that, sometimes it kind of reignites some of those ideas. So I'm a big proponent of when these crazy ideas hit, write them down, and then go back and read those from time to time.
Yeah, I don't have the best memory. I mean, if I really want to remember something, like I really have to get it down. I mean, sometimes it's dialogue, and I'll write it down quick, and I go back. I'm like, I get what I meant to do, but man, that is a full dialogue.
So being with Titanborn, which launches the week this podcast comes out, if I'm not mistaken,
June 21st. So.
Yeah, June 21st. So this will come out on launch day. Do you feel that your writing or your process is changing now that you do have a book with a big publisher, and hopefully there's going to be expectations that you follow it up? I know you said you've got a follow-up written already, but does the dynamic of writing change when the dynamic of publishing changes?
I don't think it has for me yet. I mean, I've refined my process, but it hasn't changed, mostly because they haven't given me deadlines. They want to see the performance of Titanborn 1 before they set a date for Titanborn 2. So I think if it were to become really popular and they started putting deadlines on me, that would definitely change. Like I wouldn't be able to do that verse writing all the time. I would have to sit down and get a book out. But so far it hasn't changed that much. I hope it doesn't ever, but at some point it would be nice to have a deadline where a publisher wants your book already and you don't have to worry about submitting or talking to anybody. They're just waiting for pages.
Right. A minute ago you mentioned the follow-up to The Circuit, Progeny of Vale. Is that book out now?
Yeah, that book came out in March, and then the third book is coming out this year in December.
Okay.
So that'll complete the story. It's sort of an epic trilogy, but it's really all one story. They kind of lead into each other. And so it's something you have to read them all in a row. You could try reading the second one alone, but I wouldn't advise it. I think you'll miss out on crucial parts of the story and the character, because it's very character-driven space opera. So to see their development from the first book to the end, I think, is what fans really will want to see more than even the overall story.
Gotcha. Awesome. So we've got two great series to look forward to and to follow. Excellent. Rhett, where can people find you to get connected with you and your work?
Of course. So I have my website, which is rhettbruno.com. There's a newsletter there if they want to subscribe. I send it out occasionally. I'm still building numbers there. You could get in contact with me on Twitter. That's the easiest, it's just my name, easy to find. I have a Facebook page, which again is just under Rhett Bruno. And then on my website is my email. I'm happy to respond to emails at any time.
Okay.
So those are probably the best ways, yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're going to put links to all that in the show notes. Rhett, thank you for taking time to come on the show, and I'm going to send everybody to go pick up a copy of Titanborn, which is releasing today.
Oh, and there's one more thing I want to mention, which hopefully might encourage people to go out and buy it, because I want to encourage a big launch day, because I've recently found out that there's an A-list producer and an A-list writing team who are sitting with Titanborn getting ready to pitch to a studio for a film.
Nice.
And they want to monitor sales and reception, so anyone, please go out there and get it. I'm sure any writer, it's their dream to have something turned into a movie. So
absolutely, and author stories listeners, please help one of our own to get this project made. We love to see each other succeed. So we definitely want to pitch in and help where we can.
Yeah, I wish I was allowed to say who, but
well, when you get that good news, come record a follow up, and we'll break some news. Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us, Rhett. I appreciate it, and we're going to send everybody over to your website and to Amazon to pick up Titanborn.
All right, thanks, Hank. It's been great.